it's strange because not strange in a sense, but as I'm listening to you, you seem to have an awareness because everything you've said, 99% of people I've ever spoken to wouldn't be aware that actually the contrast and difference between myself and these guys is I always had a father figure, always had a father, Hall of Famous father, great mentors, great this. Most people wouldn't see that connection as being the difference. They would just,
100%. I
sorry,
think
they just give them a formula, do this.
100%. So I love where you're going. I love advice. I'm a big advice guy. People that I love the most give the best advice. But what I realize is online advice is good, but it lacks nuance. Like I'm always obsessed to like when I was trying to build my podcast out, I was very curious to how did other people build a successful podcast? Because for a lot of people, it was a different story. Like let's use a person that I'm like a big fan of, like a Gary Vee.
Yeah.
By the time Gary Vee started his podcast, he was already had a million subscribers, a million followers on Twitter. He's already a celebrity. But he had a book deal with whatever Penguin Random House or Simon & Schuster, whatever it is. So a lot of successful podcasts are built by individuals who already have big platforms. Another example is the Nelk Boys podcast, Logan Paul's podcast.
Yeah.
Those are really big podcasts nowadays. But those people were megastars before the podcast started. So to me, like that, their podcast path is not relevant to mine because I didn't have a million subscribers or followers starting my podcast. So when it comes to advice, there's so much nuance to it. So one of the things I pride myself in, or I try to do, is I want to give the best advice possible, the most relevant, practical, nuanced advice to each individual. It's complicated. And I love what Dr. Peterson talked about. He said, for me to give you advice, I need to spend at least 10 hours hearing your story to really craft this piece of advice that's relevant to you. So when people ask me to do it in 5-10 minutes, it's almost impossible, but I try my best, right? So you're right. So when like men are always asking me for advice, and I realize that there's so many variables that work for me that will not work for you. And so 100,000%, the community aspect is a game changer. People take it. I don't think people realize how serious it is. And yeah, so I definitely do see that a lot of advice, which is why, a lot of the red pill stuff I despise so much. It lacks so much nuance. And when you really see the multiple variables in somebody's life, you realize that what worked for Jack doesn't work for Jill. And also you realize that when someone's complaining about X, Y, and Z, it's really because A, B, and C is negatively affecting him. And if you take care of those variables, X, Y, and Z goes away simultaneously.
Yeah, I mean, the red pill community is it's becoming a little bit too tribal.
Yeah.
It's shifted from good advice. Look, guys, level up, do this. Here's here's a set of rules, procedures, plans, whatever. Let's join together to. There's enough hate in the world. We don't need to encourage more. We can encourage. Look, guys, have boundaries, have your own standards, and then it's leave it at that. It's become a little bit too, for my liking, for my taste. It's become a bit too tribal and a bit too, derogative towards the opposite sex.
Yeah, 100%. It's without getting too lost in the sauce. To me, it's just modern feminism for men.
Yeah, no, I'd agree.
Like you got to think about how did feminism start? Feminism started out of a good place, and there was legitimate things that women had problems with. The right to vote. There's legitimate things, the right for work. There's legitimate problems that started the movement. But then it evolved, and now you see what feminism is today. It's nothing like, it's misandry, it's victim mentality, it's everything but what it was intended to be. And so, I say very similar things about the red pill movement. It may have started from a good place, opening men's eyes to the truth about society and about the world, but it's evolved the way feminism has evolved as well. And so, to me, I think it's so important that guys have nuance in their perspective, men and women alike, because I just see a lot of advice going out today is really destructive for the lives of men and women.
I agree completely, because when I first kind of discovered it a few years ago, it was much more focused on how are you being a better man?
Mhm.
And the one of the people that I listen to the most when it comes to calling out men, who's somebody I know that you know, is the late Kevin Samuel. He could be brutal to men. You know, if people think he was brutal to women, you should have heard him talk to men sometimes. Like,
Mhm.
mate, you know, you've got to have some standards yourself. But yeah, again, that wasn't sort of where I planned on this to go. It's just a huge topic.